Right now, some Georgia students could be forced to put their phones down while lawmakers are pushing a classroom ban statewide. Plus, with all the uncertainty surrounding student loans, a look at what borrowers need to know. And March Madness arrives in the A, how you can get to or around all the big events this weekend. This is The Take. Hello and welcome to The Take. I'm Aisha Howard in for Chesley McNeil today, and this is The Take, where we will go beyond the headlines and look at why and how stories are impacting you and your community. Well, parents and kids might have some opinions about our top story today, and a lot of them. This week, the Georgia Senate passed a bill that would ban cell phone use in elementary and middle school classrooms. The governor still has to sign it, but if this bill is signed into law, Georgia would be one of a growing number of states to pass a school cell phone ban. Joining me now to talk about this is Margaret Ciccarelli. Now, she is an attorney and the director of legislative services for the Professional Association of Georgia Educators. So a great person to talk about this. So let's just jump right into it. Your organization has actually looked into the impact of cell phones on our kids in the classroom. Tell us, what do teachers and students say about the impact, especially as it relates to performance in the classroom, Margaret?
Well, thanks for having me to talk about this this morning, Aisha. We're excited about the legislation because Georgia teachers tell us in surveys that student use of cell phones, particularly in middle grades and even in high school grades, present a major disruption to student learning and contribute to misbehavior. And that is more than 70% of middle school teachers reporting that, and more than 85% of high school teachers report that.
So we know those are startling numbers, right? But on the other side of this issue, you have the people who are worried about school safety, especially following school shootings. We just had one in our community tragically last September. So what's your response to that as it relates to parents who say, I want to be able to reach my kid at all times?
Such a tough balance, right? I'm a mom too, and I have two tweens and a teen in my house. And I think those cell phones present us the opportunity to connect with our kids, but in an emergency during a school shooting or lockdown, we want the kids to put those cell phones away and follow the directions of the educators there to assist them, and law enforcement and other first responders. Not only that, but we have some great school safety bills moving through the General Assembly that would require every Georgia school to have a panic alert system that will automatically connect to EMS and other first responders and provide real-time school mapping for those first responders to find and protect our students in schools if, God forbid, another emergency occurs. So those cell phones are one way, but probably not the most effective way for students and parents to connect in an emergency.
And that's great perspective. As you were talking, I was thinking about the amount of videos that I saw on social media from the students inside Appalachia. So many of them sort of recorded these tragic moments from beginning to end. So very good point you bring up there. Now, as we're talking about this subject for Georgia, this bill in particular, it only bans the cell phones in elementary and middle schools. But here's the catch, though. It doesn't actually tell the district how to do that. You know, we've seen the yonder pouches and different things of that nature, how to put it away. Is there a method that you can see catching on as far as what do you do with the phones?
That's going to be different, Aisha, for every community based on their needs and preferences. So the law only says that starting in the 2026-2027 school year, K through 8 schools must adopt these bell-to-bell cell phone bans. But how they do it, through a yonder pouch or through putting it in a locker, or as my district is doing, maybe putting them in a big pouch with all the phones when they enter the classroom, that is going to be up to the school district. Several districts in Georgia are already kind of piloting this idea. Marietta, several schools in DeKalb, and some in Fulton. So they will no doubt provide us feedback about how each of their strategies are working so that we can all be part of the cultural change to ensure this happens so our students are less distracted in the classroom.
Okay, so let's talk about this stat that kind of stopped me in my tracks. When your organization Page surveyed Georgia's teachers, 85% of high school teachers said phones were a major problem. So are high schools next on the list here?
We're hoping so, Aisha. My high schooler right now was thrilled that she won't be subject to this law. And in fact, when this bill moved through the General Assembly, my organization, several legislators on both sides of the aisle, and other advocacy groups actually suggested that we expand this ban to high schools. We were not successful, probably because this bill represents a cultural change that needs to happen over time, and we're hoping that the shift will begin in K-8, and then next legislative session, or the one that follows, we'll be back to talk about extending this all the way from K to 12.
That will definitely be a tougher sell, and I think with the mom with the high schooler, I think you know that. So we will revisit this subject again. I'm sure it's going to be a dinner table conversation for sure. Margaret Ciccarelli, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks so much, Aisha.
All right, so a lot going on under the Gold Dome right now with the end of the legislative session. Just a little more than a week away, sine die next Friday. Lawmakers are moving forward with some school safety measures, but last night we learned that they are giving up on creating the database that would have collected information on students who might commit violence. So this idea was really thrown out there after the deadly shooting at Appalachia High School in September. One of the concerns following that shooting was that the school officials didn't know the alleged shooter, Colt Gray, was actually interviewed by a Jackson County Sheriff's deputy about reports of a school threat back in May of 2023. Lawmakers on both sides said that they were concerned about a database creating this kind of permanent blacklist. The new version of the bill still requires law enforcement to report threats to school officials, but that report would not be part of the students' educational records. It is one of the worst things to see when you walk out to your car and you got a boot. That just changes your whole mood. Georgia lawmakers are looking to put some new restrictions on booting. The state Senate passed a bill yesterday that would stop booters from waiting around, just lurking in the parking lot to watch you walk away from your car and then slap a boot on it for you. The senator who proposed the amendment, Democrat Josh McLaurin, says it would also prevent what he calls kickbacks to parking lot owners.
So right now, booting companies are paying up to half their boot, half their fee to property owners as kickbacks, and that has caused a lot of predatory activity.
See, I didn't even know that was happening. That's kind of shady. Even though the bill sailed through the Senate, it will have to pass the House by the end of next week to actually make it to the governor's desk. We are going to keep an eye on all of these bills over the next week or so. You're watching The Take on 11Alive Plus. Stick with us. We'll be right back. The Department of Health and Human Services is the latest federal agency slated for some major cuts. That includes the Atlanta-based Centers for Disease Control. Meanwhile, the Signal group text is still top of mind. Calls for an investigation are coming from both Democrats and Republicans. Joining us now is NBC News Washington correspondent Alice Barr, who has been covering politics for years. Alice, you know the hot topics well. Let's start with this one. Elon Musk just had this interview with Fox News along with some of his top DOJ staffers defending all the cuts that are very controversial. Let's go deep into some of the high points or the low points from that interview.
Yeah, this was unusual, and good morning to you. This was unusual because we've seen Elon Musk come out and talk, but not the DOJ staffers. You know, we've heard a lot about how these folks have been operating. Certainly a lot of federal workers who have lost their jobs have complained about feeling like they sort of came in and took over, and that there have been questions about transparency, quite frankly. So the fact that they appeared, there were several of them sitting around Elon Musk on Fox News for this interview, was really a departure from what we've seen so far. And certainly Musk was defending, you know, the way that they've been going through this effort to dramatically downsize the federal government. He pushed back against criticism that they've been moving too fast. There have been those incidents when they've been forced to rehire fired federal workers, including at the FDA, where now this morning we know there's going to be another round of layoffs there. And he said that, in fact, they are trying to do this with a very delicate, specific approach. He said that we want to measure twice, if not thrice, as he put it, and cut once. Again, there have been times when they have had to cut uncut cut again, that he said, though, when we do make mistakes, we correct them quickly and we move on. But it was interesting to hear from some of the staffers as well, one of whom talked about believing that the federal government could operate kind of like an Apple bar, that you could sort of get the kind of customer service using technology that you've come to expect from, private companies, and that they're really thinking about the federal government sort of customer service relationship operating in a very different way, was how they expressed it this morning.
Yeah, that Apple Store experience, that was very unique to sort of think about the federal government in that way. And so let's talk about the Signal group chat. So the White House has finally acknowledged the mistakes here in using that. What's being said behind closed doors about this?
Right. So we heard from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt yesterday saying that they had never denied that there had been mistakes made. That's a little bit questionable, probably a question of semantics about how far they've gone to admit that this was a big mistake to have had this reporter have been invited alongside top Trump officials who were discussing sensitive military plans for imminent U.S. airstrikes in Yemen. So they did say, yes, that was a mistake, and that, there's efforts underway to make sure that something like that never happens again. Caroline Leavitt also pointed specifically to National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, saying that he had taken responsibility, having been the one who created that group chat on Signal where these discussions took place, and somehow invited the top editor from The Atlantic into that chat. And that, again, is what they're working on, trying to figure out how that happened. But, what you're seeing up front is a little bit of sort of minor finger pointing at Mike Waltz, but President Trump has repeatedly said that, he thinks he should keep his job, that he's a good man who made a mistake and is learning from it. Behind the scenes, though, NBC News has learned that President Trump is privately angry with Waltz, and that comes according to two Republican sources with inside knowledge of those discussions. He's frustrated about the fact that this has continued to kind of eat up space in, discussions throughout this entire week. And there is this new development as well that a federal judge has now ordered the officials that were in that group chat, again, very high-ranking Trump administration officials, to preserve the messages that they were exchanging because there's an ongoing lawsuit.
All right, Alice, this subject is not dying down anytime soon. Thank you for joining us today. Well, there is a lot of uncertainty surrounding student loans as President Trump moves to dismantle the Department of Education. Last week, he announced that the Small Business Administration would take over the country's $1.6 trillion loan portfolio. And millions of people are wondering what that move means for them. Joining me now is loan expert Jack Wallace. So before we get to the Small Business Administration, we do have some big news that came down yesterday. The Department of Education is reopening applications for income-driven repayment plans. A lot of people are really interested in this. So what does this mean for the average borrower?
Well, it's good morning to you and to your viewers. It's a great day for the 1.7 million borrowers that live in the great state of Georgia that have federal student loans. As you mentioned, the department reopened the application process online at studentaid.gov in order to be able to do two things. One is get into an income-driven repayment plan that best suits your financial need, or if you haven't consolidated your federal loans yet, you again have the opportunity to apply for a consolidation online.
And so moving on now to the president's announcement that the Small Business Association will handle these student loans. Any concerns about this switch?
No, because one, the SBA has been around for quite some time making loans, guaranteed federal loans to business owners and to corporations, so they know what a guaranteed federal loan program looks like. The other issue is that Secretary McMahon was a former director of SBA during the first Trump administration, so she knows the department very, very well. And the third thing is that people are concerned about the reduction in force inside the department or at SBA. The fact of the matter is that there are contractual obligations in place with the student loan servicers and with student loan collections companies to facilitate the collection and the servicing of the federal student loans.
All right, so let's say I have student loans. All of this news is confusing to me. I haven't taken any steps to consolidate or to get a repayment plan. What can borrowers do to protect themselves? What are their steps?
Well, the most important thing to protect yourself is most people don't realize that as of January 1st of this year, you are going to be reported to the credit bureaus once you go 91 days delinquent. So it's very important not to ignore those emails or the snail mail you're getting from your student loan servicer, number one. Number two, you need to go look at studentaid.gov and pick out a repayment plan that works for you. And thirdly, you may want to consider signing up for, the payment being automatically deducted from your checking account on a monthly basis, because two things. One is it's going to keep you current, which is going to help your credit score. And number two, you're going to save about 1/4% on the interest rate that you pay on your student loan.
Wow, really good advice there. Just go ahead. Don't even give yourself the chance to forget about it. Automatic withdrawal. So I want to get your take on this new report that came down from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, saying that more than 15% of borrowers were likely behind on their student loan payments at the end of last year. It's kind of a new record here. So do you have any advice for people who are struggling?
It is very disturbing. In fact, the date on that report that came out earlier this week that you referenced is actually September 30th. So I would argue that if we were to look at data from 12/31/24, it's probably even worse. So people need to watch your segment here. And if they have federal student loans, to get online right after this airs and go handle and update their student loan financial repayment obligations that makes best sense for them or their family's finances.
All right, we thank you for those great nuggets there, and we enjoyed your segment, and thanks for being with us today.
Good luck to your viewers.
Thank you. Plenty more in store for you. This is The Take on 11Alive Plus. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Take. We're going to have much more on March Madness for you coming up. Let's check out the big weekend here in the A as the Sweet 16 is here.
For each sold-out event, they divert about 18,000 pounds of waste from going into the landfill. Sophie Armanakian is head of sustainability for State Farm Arena and says it begins with every attendee.
Our Zero Waste Squad is going through to ensure that if something can be recyclable, it is recycled.
When you finish your food and beverage, go find one of these containers. Then look and say, where does this object belong?
Then it's taken here, to the R3 room. This team acts as the sixth man, sorting through every piece of recycling, trash, and compostable material.
This is probably around 600 pounds of materials.
The R3 crew collects textiles, plastic bottles, and even gets the rebound from vapes confiscated at the entrance.
It will be taken away, and then we have to divert it.
And that French fry you may have dropped on the floor, their compost machine keeps it in bounds. To date,
we're getting ready to approach 10 million since we have started diverting from landfill, which is quite a remarkable number.
So State Farm Arena is intentional with every bit of this movement they do. The cardboard can be recycled up to 5 to 7 times. The aluminum is recycled every 60 days, so an infinite number of times. And as for the compost, that gets sent to community gardens across the Southeast. Very, very unique way. And it kind of just makes you a part of the change the next time you head out to State Farm Arena. So make sure you look for the proper bin. Well, Tyler Perry is awarding $30,000 to 5 emerging directors. It is all part of a new program centered around short films created right here in Atlanta. The program is called the Tyler Perry Studios Dream Collective. Tyler Perry posted a video on Instagram yesterday describing this initiative as an opportunity for aspiring directors to learn from professional filmmakers. So what are the requirements? You have to be 21 or older, have 5 years of experience, and you have to be eligible to live and work in the U.S. In the last 5 years, you must have directed 2 visual projects and wrote a short film script. Applications open on April 17th. So if you're interested in applying, we do have the link on 11alive.com. You can also find this article by typing Tyler Perry in the search bar. Before we go, my final take on being a cheerful giver. A recent viral video showed well-known pastor and gospel music artist Marvin Sapp telling the church ushers to lock the doors as he asked the congregation for a $40,000 offering. Look, tithes and offering has long been part of the order of the church. No matter your biblical principles, whatever you choose to follow and apply is personal, and your hard-earned money is yours, and how you choose to spend or donate it, that's up to you. And in this case, people said they felt like they were being held hostage in the church. Pastor Sapp responded saying that this has been misinterpreted and that was never his intent to make people feel that way. But when it boils down to it, if you were asking for something, you want it to come from a cheerful, genuine giver, not someone who feels bullied to give, like, here, take it, especially in a place of worship that should always feel safe. Thanks for joining us.